are back in open session. I do believe maybe there is a modification to the agenda. Was there a walk on it or not?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to add something to our consent agenda in terms of personnel.
And we know what that is because we talked about it, we've seen it. Chris, right?
Yes.
Aren't you on HR?
Yes. Well,
So we've seen it, so we will add that addition to the personnel report in the
I'll
consent.
second the motion.
Thank you. So that's on consent, but I don't see YC public, but I see a lot of staff. And Keith, you don't have anything to say, right, until later? Okay. So we don't have student reps, and the board has had opportunity to respond to many things over the last couple of days, and we're not gonna do that now. So how about we just go to consent?
Could I just have one thing, I'm sorry, I came in late, maybe you got it already, there was a tweak in the minutes, so I just wanted to, right, from where they were when they were in board docs.
Well, you're probably gonna have to talk about it now.
Oh.
What are you talking about?
Oh, well, I just wanted to point that out in case people had read the minutes earlier, that they actually, that there was a recognition of certain votes that had taken place within that, the resolution for the utility tax and for, the NISBA comments. So those are now reflected in the current.
The hearing for a
The hearing,
possible
exactly.
action,
Right.
and that hearing takes place, anything else, any other additions? I need a motion, I think,
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
second by Nicole, excellent. Now, any other questions, comments? Chris, I know at finance, we went through the consent agenda.
We went through it.
You, right?
what will be coming up, there will be, Amanda and I just discussed it, an FAQ going out about the utility tax tomorrow. So all our questions, and will be on the district website.
Yeah. So Casey will do her magic and get it
Yeah,
everywhere
so
it needs to be.
It will be out there for the public.
There is information now regarding the hearing on the website. I saw that already last week.
Yep, we've been trying to put
Right.
that out.
Very good. And Chris, anything else finance related? We're all good?
A lot of money moving around, end of year, technically stuff going on, but there's some things out there that are still not finalized.
Right. Very good. And the personnel reports, and then the modification. Any other questions? All good? Second by Nicole. Great, thank you very much. All in favor? That is everyone. And so, Dr. Brown, you can't have anything else to say. You're just, Dr. Brown's just hoping nobody says anything that may in any way be controversial in the next 15 minutes, right?
I do have one. May I?
Go ahead.
We have some new friends here. Well, one friend is coming back to us, and one is going to be in a different role next year. Julie Humble is going to be coming back to us as Associate Principal at Beverly J. Martin Elementary School. And Miss Eileen Granger is going to be transitioning from Carolina Elementary as a teacher into the Associate Principal role at Enfield Elementary with Keith. Can't wait. I'm so excited. Did I get everybody? Yeah, all right. Thank you all.
Granger, thank you.
Granger, where have I heard that name?
And we just voted on that because that was right. So we're all good.
Yeah.
Keith, how come you keep getting like lots of talent out in Enfield? I have nothing.
It's a great place to be.
I have no problem with that. I'm all for it. So we're gonna keep rolling. So well, Elbert finishes up, and I do see a policy. One more policy, Sean.
I move the adoption of policy 5420.1, which is our administration of epinephrine for suspected anaphylaxis.
Second?
And to the board, there's only one change. I'm recommending that we, our policy approval can go one of two ways. We either usually have a first reading, goes back to the policy committee, then we bring it for a second reading. Tonight, I'm recommending if we can have a supermajority vote, that we do a single reading and adoption to be able to have syringes and epinephrine available in our school buildings. You can see the only addition to this policy, which is the bold underlined text. It's gone through Kate a number of times, and I wanna make sure that I give a special notice to the work of Carrie Burke and how she has been pushing us to be as responsive to the needs of our students as possible. There's a shortage of EpiPens, and so and auto ejectors, and so this was a way to make sure that we had medicine available for students in case of an emergency. And it could only be administered by a trained professional with a physician note.
And by us going ahead and doing it on the first reading, it is in place, and so obviously it'll be in place by.
We can start just the medicine now and
Right.
make it available by the first of school.
That's the reason. Elder, go
One
ahead.
quick question. I wasn't at the policy meeting, I'm sure you guys dealt with this, but I gotta ask. So looking at the bold, the last clause, after
Yep,
or a non-patient specific order from the school medical director
yep.
implies that we will always have such a person at each school. right?
No, it implies that we have a school medical director, if I'm not mistaken, that can make the order to take place.
A meaning centralized, meaning carry, meaning somebody
No.
district-wide.
It says the school medical director, the school, not
Do you
a.
mean the district medical director as
Right.
opposed to not,
So it
each
should
school
say
does not?
Maybe it
have-
should say the district medical.
That's why I'm asking the question. It reads, it just read to me as if we were talking about each individual school, but if that's not the case, then we just need to add a word.
We could, absolutely, but if I'm not mistaken, we only have one person with the title of the medical director in the district.
And that, we contract that
okay.
service, and that is a prescribing, somebody who can prescribe. And currently that is Dr. Dindali, and it is a contract through Cuba Medical Center.
Right,
Oh, got it,
yeah.
That is different from the coordinator of health and wellness
Wellness
or.
services.
got it.
Okay.
It was just you guys are masters of language. I'm gonna leave it alone.
Feel free to make a motion, but you better do it quick before we.
No, everybody seems to understand but me, I'm good.
I'm giving them, you good? All right, all right. Any other questions we're gonna go ahead and vote on a first reading and adoption?
Mhm.
Correct. Per Sean's motion. All in favor? That is everyone. Thanks. And, moving on, just, Capital Project Community Advisory Council. If we could, Sean, go ahead, you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, this is not a voting item, this is this is the start of a conversation. Our last bond project, we found it useful, we found our committee meetings to be more exhausting than they currently are, and I don't know if that's possible on a facilities and finance meeting when you go for about 4.5 hours. And the conversation was, would it be wise for us to create a capital project community advisory council, which would be able to be a little bit more active in the bond project that we are gonna be taking on, particularly as we have multiple phases. It would also allow us to bring in some additional expertise. So for example, on the facilities meeting just last week, we were having conversations about classroom space or what may be the best use of the funds in terms of auditoriums or bathrooms, et cetera. To have that conversation, for lack of a word, void of student caregiver input, seemed like it would probably be best to have a group of folks that would be able to help give us some input as we start making these decisions. And so nothing is on to be voted on, it's just a conversation. We've already created a code of conduct advisory council, which Dr. Brown, I'm sure will be working with his team and the board officers soon to get a list out of folks to make invitations, so that will be coming, we'll be talking about that actually momentarily. But working with Amanda as well to see if we can't think about what a new advisory council would look like as well.
Just to be the devil's advocate on that,
We gotta find a new phrase, but yes, I like
okay,
it.
okay. But would it also maybe work just to do a better job of communicating when facilities is meeting and make sure that people know that they can attend those?
Great question. I think what my experience has been is that we have facilities issues that arise every year that need our attention. Water, roofing situations, right, things that come up every time that Paul has to come to, and that in itself can take an hour and a half every month. So then to add on top of that, the 2 hours a month that probably warrants our attention, and we haven't even gotten to the point in time where we're doing, what are those things called, Rob, that I hate? Change orders, thank you very much, right? We haven't even started getting to that point in time where we have to start going through change orders in the process.
The active construction process, right. Basically, the idea is to provide some continuity over the next decade. We built, well, it's 120 million, it's gonna be spent over the next 10 years. And so, board members come and go, but, you know, the levels of expertise varies, obviously, on whoever may be on facilities or finance or the sheer amount of time that it takes. So the idea that we can bring in some folks that have an interest, have a background, that we can tap into that intellectual and frankly time to help manage this process for their input and be our eyes through this process as well.
And advisory councils have no voting power, they simply make recommendations to the board. And so it's still, all things would still come through the board, but there'd be a different level of input to have some of these conversations.
And board members would be on this as well.
So, last time with the capital project, how was this advisory council formed?
It was not.
That's why.
Oh,
We
it
did it.
didn't happen last time?
No, it did not.
Oh.
And I think we're trying to learn from that process,
Uh-huh.
that was a difficult process to go through. I'm looking at Paul, and I don't know how many hours we spent, Paul, but probably 4 or 5 hours of one meeting that we go through.
Yeah.
It was 3 different construction manager go-to guys that, there was varying degrees of talent there and, yeah.
So,
Water running
ideas
uphill,
about how
so.
this would be formed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of having this
Yeah.
conversation. We could put it back up on a future agenda. I would recommend if we're gonna do it, we think about doing it soon, about what the language looks like. The advisory councils, based upon how our current policy is written, are usually under the discretion of the superintendent to form.
Right.
All board members have the option of participating in any advisory council, even while some board members may be officially quote-unquote appointed. Does that make sense? So anyone who wants, any board member who wants to attend, can attend. But we can have that conversation about, are there particular people that we would like to invite to participate, whose expertise we feel would be helpful. And for me, it also includes students, because that part I feel has been missing, and I think it's a little different to add students to a facilities committee as opposed to being on an advisory.
Direct participants, yeah.
So thoughts, critiques, reactions, because I'll start crafting some language and getting it out to folk. Or if anyone else wants to write it, please do so.
I'll be happy to help you. I think it's a great idea, and I think we should look to do them in other realms of our scope of work as well.
I created EILC, 11, well, it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
EILC, very similar. Student Advisory Council, your superintendents. Group.
Yeah.
I'll just add to this one, obviously, those of us who went through it last time understand that this council, this advisory committee can't just be about, or should not just be about the end product, about the construction, that's the easiest, the obvious part. What we really need a lot of expertise surrounding too is the financial aspect of managing $120 million. That was a lot of fun, we learned, we had some fun with our financial managers. But there's an area of expertise that can't be overlooked. We basically went out on faith and asked a broad community to say, trust us, we'll give you a return. That has to be managed. It's not gonna, you can't wish that. So, just I'm saying that into the public record, so we're all looking at both sides of that fence.
Absolutely.
We're looking for expertise.
Absolutely.
Anyone
So,
else? Go ahead.
no vote needed, but is the board in support of trying to take a look at that, writing up some language? I'll connect with Aaron and we'll go from there and connect with Doc and we'll get something in front of us at some point in time.
Absolutely.
It would need to be a resolution, so we can definitely have a further conversation about it with more details and structure around it as well.
Sure.
consensus? You good, Maureen?
Yeah.
All right.
The next two, I'll move momentarily. We did create, the last advisory council created was the Code of Conduct Advisory Council. In talking with Lily, the idea was, and probably other folks in the team, the idea was to adopt our current code of conduct to make sure that we are not out of compliance with,
Or we don't continue to.
we don't
Yeah.
continue to be out of compliance. And to do so, it would require us having a hearing, and so we'd have to put in a notice of hearing 75 days or 45 days in advance. And so today the ask is that we would vote on the hearing for the safety plan. It would give us one attempt at a policy committee meeting to just do some more review. We understand that it's not the code of conduct that we probably want, but to put something officially on record, and that would then give the advisory council something to work with, and that would be the thing that we would focus on over the year to make recommendations to the board by, I think it says, May or June of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. June of 2020. So that's why you see here is both the notice of the safety plan, notice of hearing for the safety plan, and notice of hearing of the unified code, that we publish those notices. If we vote today, I'm sure tomorrow to give us our 45 days, work on the current codes we have, and move those forward.
But moving them separately to vote.
I think you have to have both, right? A unified code and a safety plan.
Safety plan, right.
Did I explain that
Yeah.
poorly?
No.
I'm only saying this because of what we experienced the last 2 days. I understand we need a code, I understand New York State law subscribes some things that we must add to our code. I'll also say that today in particular was about language, and I, just by happenstance, poked my head on several tables, because we held groups of administrators and teachers from other places. There were at least 3 tables in the cafeteria talking about this code. They were still using the language, offenders, victims, right? And it flowed as naturally as water. And to the extent that we lead the way, if that's what it takes, to begin to change not just the intention of this document, but the language, we will do the state a tremendous favor. Do not talk about the prison industrial complex and breaking that up, the importance of language on one hand, and be calling 3rd graders offenders. It's an incongruity that is just, was painfully obvious to me today.
I think we all completely agree. We spent a good deal of time having those various conversations. The other thing that I'm gonna also just add that was shocking to me is the language that is also mandated by the state. And so what's interesting is, as innovative as we wanna be, and we have to find a way around this, and maybe that's our job, but a good portion of that language is already dictated word by word. What counts as a weapon, we have no decision on, right? That those sorts of things. And so it's been an interesting experience for us for well over a year. My apologies, policy comrades. But it's also been enlightening in terms of what language we have to use and what we don't have to use. But I think that's our role. I'm in complete agreement. Oh, so with all that being said,
I need a motion.
I move that we hold or vote to hold a notice of hearing for a safety plan to be held on 9/24, as well. We'll do them one at a time if that.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions at this time? Not seeing any. All in favor? That's everyone?
I make a motion for our notice of hearing for a unified code of conduct to be held on 9/24.
Second?
Second by Pat. We good? All in favor? That's everyone? Anything else, Dr. Brown, anyone else have any other discussion items that we're good? Upcoming dates, work session, we do have I'm not seeing, am I not seeing it here?
Well, next Tuesday, we have policy work session at 5, and human resources work session at 6:30, it's next week. The following week, we have the curriculum work session at 5, and then.
But that's where,
then
right, that's where I'm
voting
gonna,
meeting.
right, that's where I'm gonna stop you, is that,
Yeah.
I believe that, August 13th is, that at 5 o'clock, that is a public hearing for.
Oh, right, so it's been changed, we're gonna meet for curriculum at 4.
At 4.
And then the public hearing.
So
and
just
then-
note, the public hearing is not a board meeting, so
Right.
we don't need a quorum, but certainly folks, I get to be here.
Yeah.
But we will have that meeting, and we will, that hearing, and it will be publicized anywhere and everywhere. And that'll be at 5 o'clock, and then the board meeting will follow, after that public hearing at 6. Go ahead.
Just one quick piece for board members. I know how much fun our policy committee meetings are.
Love
We are gonna have some conversation about the New York State law regarding immunization exemptions. So if you are getting questions or you want to learn more about what we're doing as a district or how we're gonna be communicating, which we have already been doing, that'll be a meeting to come attend.
Sean, I just wanted to mention, I sent to you and Moira that I am gonna be on vacation next Tuesday.
You did say.
I did, and I got no response, so, I mean, feel
There
free to
was-
soldier on, but
There was
I,
a certain amount of disgust, was that it?
I felt so bad, I was so happy to put on policy, and then I saw when it was meeting, but,
Don't feel bad.
I mean,
We'll connect the next day or so to make sure we either will confirm or check it over.
cause I could do it on that Thursday if we wanted to change it, but I will not be offended
And I
if you
can't
have
do
one.
it on that Thursday.
Oh,
so-
right, oh.
I
Well,
think we
then
should soldier on.
Soldier on.
Cause I've got HR after that anyway, so.
Moira has spoken.
Okay,
Just my
Moira
opinion.
wants, Moira gets. Whatever Moira wants, Moira gets.
Policy
Is that
excitement
it?
never ends.
It's close, it's
Right.
close.
We're all gonna have t-shirts next week, watch.
Well, I ran out of agenda, so, Dr. Brown, are we good? Without objection, we are done after a long couple days. Congratulations, everybody.
Yeah, man.